Fair warning, this show contains strong language and adult themes from time to time. Sorry, Jerry can't help it.
Sick Boy Wolfgang Productions presents The Offering with Jerry Horror. A deep dive into the history of film and its filmmakers. Mostly horror, always genre.
It's always Halloween at the Haunted House of Hamburgers, Long Island's only Halloween-themed restaurant. At Haunted House of Hamburgers, they are obsessed with both Halloween and hamburgers, so why not have the best of both worlds every day? Salivate over their delicious hamburgers during Boo Brunch, along with their Witch's Brew and Crypt Keeper cocktails. Or take a stab at the undead desserts, such as I Scream Sundays, with your bobbing for apple pie. My favorites are the Afterlife alcoholic shakes. I'd go for the Pentagram Passion Fruit, or the Exorcism Espresso Martini Shake, or my go-to, the Loch Ness Monster Lobster Rolls. This place is fun as hell. They even encourage you to come dine in, dressed in costume. Your kids will love that. Or that could be one hell of a memorable first date. They're not going to forget that, right? Here's a little insider tip. For a far-out, trippy dining experience, ask your waiter for 3D glasses. It's pretty rad, let me tell you. Located at 330 Fulton Street in Farmingdale, New York, it's the restaurant that looks like a haunted house. You won't miss it, I promise. Make Haunted House of Hamburgers your year-round Halloween destination. Attention horror movie buffs. Remember the good old days back when Netflix would actually deliver physical media to your mailbox? How often do you find yourself reminiscing about those trips to your local video store, sifting through every single collection, discovering a movie treasure that you've never seen before? If niche is your knack, then Mailbox Movies is the DVD delivery service for you. Their meticulously curated collection has something for every horror enthusiast. With simple online ordering and speedy DVD delivery right to your front door, Mailbox Movies has unbeatable prices that will give you more screams for your buck. Remember to use the promo code JerryHorror for 50% off your first month. Don't settle for less. Get the best in horror delivered to your door. Head on over to mailboxmovies.com and start your terrifying movie marathon today. Welcome to The Offering with me, your host, Jerry Horror. Each week we take a deep dive into the history of film and filmmakers. Mostly horror, always genre. Please take a moment to subscribe to our show wherever you find your favorite podcast to stay up to date on future episodes. Coming up, there was a video game spin-off planned, but the plug got pulled when this movie failed to deliver a high score at the box office. Tons of gruesome and gnarly practical gore was cut from this R-rated film, even though its target audience was teenage gore hounds. The writers on this movie went on to write Seven, 8mm, and the spiritual sequel to this film, Hideaway. Stay tuned, you're not going to want to miss this.
Creepy classics, modern fights, Jerry guides us through the nights. Horror's history in the lights, exploring endless chills and heights. George Romero, lost footage and hidden gems, director's visions, dark diadems behind the scenes. We're taken there, insightful whispered secrets we share. Sam Raimi. The Offering with Jerry Horror, stories old and new. Jason Kruger, Bruce Campbell, Joe and twists that shake your core. Every episode, we craving more. Mostly horror, always genre.
Ladies and gentlemen, friends beyond the binary, this is The Offering with me, your host, Jerry Horror. Hey, thanks to the Scariatrics for giving us that rad new theme song. Those guys are great, really came in clutch. I like the new theme song. What do you think? Let me know. Oh, by the way, happy Halloween, folks. Tonight is Devil's Night. We had to drop something really scary and dastardly, of course, because it's the spooky season. And that's how we do. Folks, I'm always telling you, there is an opportunity for you to leave a review for our show. Give us a good 5-star review. I will read it on air. Folks, buckle up because this is another 5-star review from our good friend Night Drive NYC. And of course, it starts with, bam, 5 stars. The only movie podcast you will ever need. The Offering quickly became my favorite movie podcast, and here's why. Jerry gets under the hood and dives deep into wild lore and unspoken Hollywood tales of some of my favorite films. I don't need my movie podcasts to break down screenplays or explain to me film theory. I want more of what Jerry does. Every episode feels like it's story time with my older brother or fun uncle telling me some wild story behind my favorite movie. I learn, I'm entertained, I laugh a few times. It's got heart. Give him a listen now. And guess what? Thank you, Night Drive NYC, because they are giving me a listen right now. It is happening. It is going down. Night Drive NYC, thank you so much. That is a very kind review. I always hope to be the fun uncle. You know, there's a lot of people, they go and they're like, I'm going to be a great dad. I'm like, no, I'm just going to be the uncle that shows you smut and gets you drunk. Like that's about as far as I'm willing to go with my fatherhood. But I do thank you for that kind review. Don't forget, folks, get us, Apple Podcast. You go there, you go to the pod page, wherever you want. You leave a review. I'll read it on air. Proof positive. Hey, I hope everybody's been having a really fun fall season. We are deep, deep into the middle of this fantastic, spooktacular episode today. Oh my God, are we going to blow your minds? It's going to be exciting. It's going to be scary. It's going to be all of those things. I've oversold it, haven't I? I've really oversold this episode. Well, you know what? There's a little something for everybody, and I promise it's no trick. It's all treat. So, people have been asking me, Jerry, did you ever do ghost hunting or urban exploring? And of course, the answer is yes. I've done a little bit of everything. I've worked on horror films. Anything that is tangential to being spooky, you name it, I've done it. I'm a jack of all trades, but a master of none. Check it out, folks. This is a scary story, so I really want to preface, if you scare easily, it might be time to just skip forward. I want to say this was probably around 2005. And I had been regularly doing a lot of these different urban exploration projects where you go to a place and it's freaky. Some people have said that I'm an empath. Not in that sense that you hear now on social media, but an empath is though I'm able to receive things and be sensitive to things that other people might not be aware of. I do think that I possess this gift, but I'm not quite sure how to use it. I'm not in tune with it. I've never been taught how to use it. I just get feelings, I get things that I can't explain, and I think that's why we call it the supernatural, because it truly is the unexplained, much like death itself. They say death is only a window. Where does it go? No one knows what's beyond. At that point in my life, I thought it would be pretty cool to find out. I was dating this girl. She was crazy. She was like this total goth girl. She had red hair. She used to wear the thigh-high boots, the whole thing, the fishnets. It's, hey, look, we all want us a goth big titty girlfriend. What can I say? And I've had quite a few of them. They don't stick around because a lot of them are, well, I'm a terrible person. That's number one. And number two, I'm a terrible lay. But they usually just don't stick around because eventually they figure out that I'm a terrible lay. No, seriously though, I'm dating this girl. And she brings her friend, and she lives in Jersey. And Jersey is crazy. Jersey has a lot of weird stuff. If you've ever looked up different things, New Jersey has this really deep, deep lore of urban legends, urban myths. It's also a very old place. It's been there for a long time. And the longer a place has existed, the more history it has. With that being said, me, my girlfriend, and this girl decide we're going to go urban exploring. Maybe it's suburban exploring. I said, listen, I'm at this point where I don't want to know anything, because if I know something about the place, I'm going to research it and it's going to put something in my head and I'm going to go in with that. And I think for me, I didn't want to go in with any kind of preconceived notions of knowing that something terrible had happened or that sort of thing. Because I think a lot of times when people tell you about the tragedy, you put it in your brain. You're saying, oh, okay, well, that's what I'm looking for, and I said, no, I want to go in cold. So we went to this place, gigantic building. It's about 2 or 3 stories, and it was all burned out. The whole building was just destroyed. There were just kind of like pieces, like a structure, like a shell. And this building had to be at least 100 years old, maybe older than that. And right off the bat, we get out of the car, we get to where this place is, and everything just felt really cold. This was, I guess, maybe the beginning of September. It was still warm out, but everything in this spot felt cold. And there's no lights other than the flashlights that we brought because it's kind of out in the middle of nowhere. And I noticed that it was up on this great big hill. And you could see down into the town. And obviously there's a Taco Bell now, there's all this stuff. But I'm sure, 120 years ago, there wasn't. It was just, a rural town in New Jersey. So we start exploring these corridors, and obviously it's spooky. When you're out in the middle of nowhere in the dark, it's always scary because your imagination runs away with you. I could have swore out of the corner of my eye, I'm walking down one of these corridors, that I saw something that was the shape and size of a child. Did you just see that where, I'm not on any kind of drugs, I'm not drinking or anything. Did I just see what I think that I saw? And I got a feeling all over me as if I was completely enveloped, cocooned in cold. And I could feel it all through me. I could feel it in my fucking eyeballs. It was one of the scariest things. It wasn't just like, when you catch a chill and you get goose pimples or whatever, goosebumps. This was something different. This felt like a presence or energy. I felt very uncomfortable. And normally I would say, all right, well, let's keep going. Because again, we don't have digital cameras. We're taking photos with like OG cameras. No, the iPhone hasn't been invented yet. I said to myself, I'm like, all right, girls, we got to get out of here. I'm like, I don't know what it is. I don't know what's happening here, but we need to leave. Then I could see out of my eye, it looked like in the shadows of where the staircase that had been destroyed, it looked like a group of children. And I said, that's it, we're out. We are completely out. So we go and we get in the car. So we're hanging out, we're in the town or whatever. Believe it or not, we run into a town constable. And I thought this guy is gonna, break our shoes or whatever and be upset. And he says, he's like, you guys weren't up at the old school, right? And he's like, it's kind of dangerous. Like the whole thing is falling apart. It's over 100 years old. Well, what exactly happened there? And he told me that this specific town in New Jersey would flood. And one night they had a really bad flood where it was like 4 feet high and rising. It took out most of the town. So to get the children to safety, that was actually the school. And they took the kids, they brought them to the school, and they said, okay, you're going to stay here. We try to figure out what the hell we're going to do with this flood. And at this point, there's no electricity. So they had given them a bunch of gaslight lanterns. Well, unfortunately, in the middle of the night, the gaslight lanterns, one of them must have exploded or gotten knocked over, and the kids were locked in that school, and it caught fire and probably killed a couple of dozen kids. So at that moment, I went completely cold again, and I realized, what did I see? I thought I saw children, and I had no idea. I also started to realize that I felt pain. I felt suffering in this place. There was a misery to it, and I wanted no part of it, and that's why I left. So after he told us this whole story, he said the school burned down, and it was municipal property, and no one ever knew what to do with it. It was still standing all these years later. Believe it or not, a week later, there was a collapse at that school. Whatever was left, the rubble, had basically kind of imploded onto itself, and then they were just clearing the land and making sure people didn't go there anymore. But that happened like a week after we were there. It kind of freaks me out. That was the last time I did urban exploration. I was out. I was totally out. And I just decided, you know what? I like talking about those big rubbery monster movies with you guys. And hey, today's episode is no exception. Oh boy, this is a very weird horror film from the 90s. It's definitely in the classification of cultural artifact of its time. It also is yet another attempt. It's a failed franchise starter, because that's what we talked about this season. I think that they had a character in this film they thought was going to be a much bigger deal than he ended up being, because at the end of the day, this said character comes off like a Saturday morning cartoon. And sometimes that's a good thing, but not in this case. Also, the star of this movie had just come off the biggest hit of his career, which I gotta stop myself. Why don't you folks get yourself some candy corn, maybe a little popcorn, some candy apples. Let's get funky. Maybe you go bobbing for apples. Maybe you go bobbing for Jerry. You're already here. Let's do it. And folks, don't forget, this is the penultimate episode of The Offering, which is, in case you don't know, because I didn't know what it meant, penultimate means the second to last. So soon we're going to be saying goodbye, and we've got a big spectacular finale. We're going to blow stuff up. It's going to be crazy. Who knows what'll transpire on that episode? It might get a little wacky. Speaking of wacky, make sure you've got your drinks and your wacky tobacco, because after the break, we're going to delve deep into one of the biggest oddities of the 90s. Yeah, it's one of those movies. Have you seen it? Maybe you have, maybe you haven't. You know that. Wait a second, I'm going to stop myself. Make sure you got all your treats, because there's no tricks here, folks. Stay tuned after the break. We're going to talk all about that movie. The film in question today is very much a time and place movie. If you were there in 1994, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And I think a lot of times, for me at least, it's hard for me to think about older listeners or younger listeners conceptualizing some of these films that I've covered, because I was watching them at such an important age. Previous guest of the show, Sean Q. King, Screamwalkers, sick plug. We saw this movie. This was another cut out of school early. We're making monster movies, and we need to consume as many horror films as we can get our grubby little mitts on. So this is definitely, I think, one of the times where Sean would drive. He had a license before I did. He's a little older. And it would be one of these things where, like, whatever. It was like Wes Craven's New Nightmare. This is all 94, and we just went through a tear. And it was like anytime there was a horror movie playing, we'd cut out of, like, the last two classes and just go to the Comac multiplex, and we would see whatever the offering was. Sick plug. See whatever the offering was that week at the local multiplex. Here's the thing. There was Brainstorm, which is kind of about virtual reality, but it's kind of not. There's Tron, which, yeah, like, it is a virtual reality. It's the reality within the machines. There was Videodrome, which is about the reality and the meta-textual quality of VHS, which is a total thing. We had this really weird obsession with virtual reality in the 90s. And there were tons of films. There were books. One of my favorites was... there was a game for the PC called Virtual Stupidity with Beavis and Butthead. And my friend had that one. He back in the old, when you'd rip discs, ripped me a disc of that. And it was just the funniest thing, because it was Beavis and Butthead lampooning all of virtual reality. They had even set up these things. It was like everything. That was the hot new buzzword. It was like virtual reality. And they had things at malls where you'd put on goggles, and it was some poorly rendered bullshit. And they would move you around, like those big spinning geospheres. They had flight simulators. They had anything you can imagine. They tried. A lot of that wasn't truly virtual reality, because it's kind of like when you play like a third-person game like GTA. You have control. You have control over the character, and you're able to explore and organically see things through the eyes of that character. virtual reality in 1994 was not there. So a lot of times you're watching something on a screen and maybe it's reacting to the movements, like it's a flight sim and it's going to the left, it's going to the right, it's able, but a lot of that is also because it was a pre-programmed piece of software that went from point A to point B. You know, it's like when you run an application, it has a job to do and it will get you from A to B, but you can't make any of your own choices. Maybe in some of the flight sims, you know, if you jerked it too much to the left, it would crash. You didn't have that kind of sentience. It wasn't there. It was very much a gimmicky buzzword. In 1990, we had Total Recall, which is a little bit like a virtual reality thing, where we're talking about memories being implanted. Did I go to Mars? Was I really there? Is this just a fake memory they generated? In 92, we have The Lawnmower Man, which was based on a Stephen King book, which he then sued him because he didn't like the movie. Big surprise, he didn't like The Shining either. It's a Pierce Brosnan. That really dealt with, you had this guy who was a simpleton, and he was able to become smart because of virtual reality. So they always have to play with it in different ways. Like, it really is a cool conceptual piece as far as how you're going to adapt virtual reality. Like, what is it that you're going to use? Because, again, all of these films are different. Like, Brainstorm is more like an espionage movie. Tron is an adventure. Videodrome is a body horror film. So it's interesting to see all of these different filmmakers contextualize it in their own personal way. And I think that in some ways, that's what's most exciting about virtual reality. There were some other films. Let me get into the other films because we have to preface this. We're doing the table setting. Virtuosity, 1995. That's where you have, and that was a young Russell Crowe. That was like his real big screen debut with Denzel. But that's a virtual reality movie. He's like this character that's like sentient, comes to life, and he's harassing Denzel Washington and his family. So they're taking it, you know, it's the man from the machine. It's the man that came out. There was also Ghost in the Machine. That was another one that was about a killer that came out of the computer, which is, you know, it was ridiculous. I can't forget this because the same year as Virtuosity, there was Johnny Mnemonic. And that's a cyberpunk movie with Keanu Reeves. And we're dealing again with the virtual reality technology. And it's crazy because even though it's this huge hot thing to use in movies, everybody puts a different spin on it. There was Virtual Combat, also in 95, which was Don the Dragon Wilson. And that movie is just preposterous. Honestly, out of all of these movies, go find Virtual Combat because obviously it's a ripoff of the Mortal Kombat. But Don the Dragon Wilson is able to go into this arcade game and he's fighting people, and it makes no sense. They're using it as a delivery for him to fight people, and that's pretty interesting. Albert Pune, previous episode, Cyborg, sick plug, 1993's Arcade. That's kids going into a virtual space. That's a very 1993 movie. There was a little bit of, it was more of a cyberspace movie, but if you want to include hackers, I'll let you put hackers on this list. Where does this end up? Well, we got The Matrix. The Matrix is a big groundbreaking thing, and that's about getting plugged in. You're getting plugged into the machine. We had Gamer. That was Gerard Butler, which I like Gamer. Gamer is a cool little movie about, you know, if you could control somebody, like if Call of Duty was a real thing and you had real flesh and blood people. We also have Assassin's Creed was on that list. The terrible film adaptation of Assassin's Creed was also a virtual reality thing. We had The Cell, Tarsem's The Cell with Jennifer Lopez. That was also another VR thing. And even Free Guy. Free Guy is about like a virtual reality, a little bit more like if you were in a GTA, you're in a video game essentially. So that was kind of their spin on it. Here's the problem. Can I tell you the problem, Uncle Pete? This is the problem. It opens the door to digital effects, for better or worse. In a lot of these movies, we're getting crappy CGI effects. The stuff just wasn't there, especially in the mid-90s. You can feel that separation with today's movie, which is Brain Scan, by the way.
Now that I have your attention, please allow me to introduce myself. My name is Trickster.
What was that film you were watching?
Death, death, death.
Death, death, death.
Part 2.
Oh, Lord.
Michael's seen it,
Go for it, man.
done it, played it.
Look, I've played them all.
And just when he thought he'd die of boredom,
Brain scan. The ultimate experience in interactive terror.
Never leave home without it.
You're in the game, man. You're in control.
You must think like a killer. Cover up any clues. Leave no witnesses, no evidence.
a challenge he can't resist.
It was so real. It was sick.
See, I told you, man. I told you it would blow your mind.
A game he can't escape.
There was a grisly murder in the quiet suburban town of Mountview today.
So you did it.
What was on that disc?
It's not a game anymore.
I'm Lieutenant Hayden.
It's real.
It wasn't supposed to be real.
Real, unreal, what's the difference?
I didn't kill the man. I didn't even know him.
You're in this now. You won't survive on your own. You started this and now you're afraid to finish it just like you're afraid of everything else.
I won't kill her. Shoot her.
Wait. The witness has to die.
Edward Furlong, Frank Langella, and introducing T. Ryder Smith as the trickster. Brain Scan.
I can't wait to see what you do next.
Brain Scan it's the movie that is the bridge between practical effects and to CGI nonsense. And some of it is really cheesy. Like if you look at some of the effects in this movie, like when Edward Furlong is going into the machine or we're going into the game, it's really hokey. And it's hokey in a way that if you watched it, and if you were a kid then and you watched it now, you'd be like, whoa, this is extreme. You know, it's very of its time. And I think out of a lot of the movies we've done this season, I think that Brain Scan kind of holds up the best out of all of them, and I would not have suspected that. I would have probably thought to myself, oh, this is a really piece of dated media that wouldn't translate in 2024, but god damn it, here we are 30 years later, and wow, it still works. This movie works, and it's charming. It has a really charming, dopey quality to it. Let me introduce you to writer Andrew Kevin Walker. Okay, this is an important name in the production of this film. He was working on a bunch of low-budget horror movies. He was living in New York, and he was hoping that he could become an acclaimed writer. He just wanted his shot. And he's doing these movies. They're made on a shoestring budget. They go direct to video. Some of the stuff that he did, I've never even heard of. It seems like it was some kind of a Ponzi scam to make horror movies. Like, yeah, sure, make the movie. But it's really just about like hiding investment money, allegedly. He kind of gets his big break, Andrew Kevin Walker, by writing an episode of Tales from the Crypt. And then they invite him back and they're like, hey, do you want to write some more? He's like, I sure will. I got nothing going on. After that, he gets an offer. One of the people who saw Tales from the Crypt, one of the producers, was working for this independent studio. And he said, hey, would you like to write a feature? He's like, we've had this concept about a virtual reality character and we just can't seem to crack it. Would you like a shot at it? Yeah, well, we're going to get into that. But he also wrote Hideaway, which is another virtual reality thriller with Jeff Goldblum and Alicia Silverstone. And the sell with that was kind of like, it's Alicia Silverstone, but in her first horror movie. But it's not much of a horror movie. It's more of a thriller. I don't know. I think they were just trying to market that one. Really, what happens is this guy just wanted to make a movie. And he's living in New York. And he says to his parents, he's like, I have no money. He's like, if you guys could like support me while I write this screenplay. And he is working his ass off to write Brain Scan. He's redoing the drafts. He's trying to figure out, this is my big shot. This is like his 8 Mile, his Eminem moment. And he's like, I have to capitalize. So his parents are supporting him. He's living in New York. He's doing some side gigs on these little independent horror films. This guy ends up writing 7. And then 7, David Fincher's 7. And the supposed sequel to that movie was 8mm. 8mm was supposed to be the sequel to 7, but Fincher wasn't interested. And another studio bought the screenplay. And they were like, oh, we'll take it. They popped Nicolas Cage in there. I like 8mm. I think it's an underrated film. Really enjoy it. You got the machine in there. You got some James Gandolfini. some good stuff. Good stuff in 8mm. It works for me. A lot of genre stuff, obviously. He did Joe Johnston's The Wolfman. That was the one with Benicio del Toro. I like that Wolfman. I think that's good. That's another movie where they threw away most of Rick Baker's effects, like they did on Cursed. Sick plug, previous episode. Yeah, I don't know what it was, but again, this is the digital age. This is, oh no, we'll have the machines will do it. We don't need Rick Baker. And it's like at the end of the day, like, you fucking need Rick Baker. These effects suck. He also wrote Tim Burton's Sleepy Hollow. That's another favorite of mine. I really like Sleepy Hollow. If you're looking for a recommend and you haven't seen it or you've never seen it, I definitely say seek out Tim Burton's Sleepy Hollow. They just did a really nice 4K transfer of the movie. Looks beautiful. You got Christopher Lee in there. You got a whole bunch of old horror icons just playing different pilgrims in that movie. And I love it. I love it. Could we do that one? Most recently, he wrote The Killer, which was an amazing movie on Netflix. And that was with his longtime collaborator, David Fincher. And again, this is what I say to you guys, and you got to do this stuff. You could be working on no-budget horror movies. Next thing you know, you're writing Tales from the Crypt. Next thing you know, hey, you want to make a movie? Write us a movie. We'll go make it. And this guy had an amazing trajectory. He's had a fantastic career. He's made a ton of residuals. He's working again with David Fincher on something new. We're not quite sure what it is yet, but he is writing it. And it's cool because he linked up with him early in his career on that first feature, Seven. And now he's got this relationship. But these are humble beginnings, which is why, like, when people say to me, oh man, I want to write my movie, I want to do this, I want to, just fucking do it. Because this guy just did it. He did it, and look where he ended up. You can do it too. Who did he sell the screenplay to? It's a company called Triumph Films, which was also known as Triumph Releasing Corporation. And this was the American independent film studio division of Sony Pictures. And they geared most of their stuff as direct-to-video fodder, because we've spoken in the last couple of episodes that home video is where you made your money. There were some serious ways that you talk about Full Moon, obviously the stuff with like Puppet Master. They were able to go on to build an empire. Literally, they had their distribution deal through Paramount. That was a pipeline for money. I mean, damn, they made like 7 of those movies. They've made more, but canonically, I only count like 7 or 8 of them. I don't count like Retro Puppet Master. Let's if once you get me talking about Charles Band's cinematic universe of Puppet Master, we could be going on for quite some time. So Triumph was founded in 1982, and then it was defunct by 2014, just like 10 years ago. This thing existed for 42 years, which is absolutely insane. The successor to this studio, which would later take over most of their direct-to-video, direct-to-cable streaming sort of thing, would be Screen Gems. So you guys probably know them as the company that would, Screen Gems did like Anaconda. They do a lot of stuff, that's more geared into the genre film thing. Really, this was a partnership with Triumph Films, with the French company Gaumont, so that Sony would have a hand in foreign distribution. They started working with Columbia TriStar, which was another subsidiary of Sony, and they said, listen, we've got this movie. It's a virtual reality movie that this guy wrote. What do you think about doing it? They said, look, this is good enough for a feature. This is definitely good enough for a feature, and we don't think we want to go direct to video. So if you guys can get some stars attached to this movie, I think we could put this in cinemas and it'll work. Now, the script for Brain Scan had been written in 1987. It was originally centered around a VHS tape, which was kind of like a Ring thing before the Ring existed. So just so you guys know, this guy might have done it first. The Ring obviously is based on Ringu, which came from Japan. But again, there are things that are out in the cultural zeitgeist that if this dude's thinking about VR, he's thinking about haunted VHS tapes. You have an idea for a movie, there's some kid in the middle of Iowa, there's some kid in the middle of the Ukraine who has the same idea because you guys are growing up through that same moment in time. After that, Michael Roy acquired the script and he performed some uncredited rewrites, and he turns the tape in the movie into an interactive CD-ROM because it was the style at the time. That's what was hot, interactive video games. Basically, he thought that if he changed this into the whole video game thing, we can bring in kids. The VHS thing could be for adults or whatever. But once you go in that whole thing of like PC gaming, okay, now we've got something. The character of the Trickster, our central villain, who is supposed to be like our new Freddy Krueger. This guy, he's supposed to be the guy. He's supposed to be your new horror icon. We're going to all wear t-shirts with the Trickster. We're going to buy action figures. And they were trying. You know, there's a lot of times that something organic happens on a production. Oh, yeah, this, you know, like this guy really pops. It's going to... No, this whole time they're like, we can... Again, previous episode, Dr. Giggles. Previous episode, shocker. Sick plugs both. That was studios' attempts to create their own kind of Freddy Krueger. So this is now Sony's independent film division trying to do the same thing, because it was 1994. Freddy was dead. Jason was about to go to hell in the final Friday. The slasher movie, the big slasher icons were pretty much dead. Leatherface, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3 came out. It did okay, but it didn't set the box office on fire. So the character of the Trickster was also a creation in the rewrites, as the original script by Walker had no physical antagonist, and it was simply a voice that tormented Michael over the phone. So now this original script, man, it sounds fucking scary, right? You get these mysterious VHS tapes in the mail, someone calls you on the phone, and then you wake up, right? Because some of the excerpts of the script, they're out there. You can find them. Essentially, what was going on in Walker's original script was he would have a dream. He would think it was a dream, our central character, and then he would wake up, and a few days later, a videotape would come in the mail. And what he thought was his dream really happened, and someone was filming it, you know, like a snuff film kind of a thing. That combined with the scary phone calls, I don't know, man. Better movie? Am I crazy here? Kind of sounds like a better movie. It sounds scarier. You don't know who's really tormenting you. Who's filming you? Who's the voice on the other end of the phone? I don't know. Original script from Brain Scan kind of sounds like a winner. Producer Pete, can we rip this off? Yes, we can. I have gotten confirmation. Now, initially, the climax was to have the Trickster become more of a deformed monster through usage of like more prosthetics and animatronics. Once the director Flynn saw the creature, he's like, we're going to use more digital effects. The monster designs were too real and too horrific. Now I could tell you where we're already going off the rails with this movie, that we're not going to use the fantastical prosthetic and practical effects. We're just going to use CGI bullshit, and that's what's going to be the main draw into this film. They realize the first thing they've got to do is they've got to cast the Trickster, because that's going to be their moneymaker. So instead of casting the protagonist or anybody else in the movie, they're like, let's find this monstrous bad guy. And they find T. Ryder Smith, who was a stage actor. He was doing a lot of independent stuff. And I got to tell you, as the Trickster, he's corny, he's hammy, because you can tell he's a stage actor and he's playing it very broad. But also, I will say, within these rewrites of the script, I don't think he has much to work with. So he's just, you know, and that's what I love about this movie. Can I tell you what I love about this movie? The Trickster, this guy, T. Ryder Smith, he's going for it. Like, he's in his own movie. He's like 10 levels more serious and above where every other character is in this film. And you know what? I kind of appreciate that commitment. I appreciate that this guy like went hard and he's like, yeah, this is like some shitty teen slasher, but I'm going to fucking commit, man. And that's like the best case scenario. Sometimes it's too hammy, it's too over the top, but for a character called the Trickster who comes out of a video game, we're going to get into that. And this movie was firmly aimed at kids my age. Like, I was the perfect age for this. I think he learns about the video game. He goes, it's like in the back of Fangoria. And I was like, oh, wow, I listened to Fangoria. And he had like Primus posters on his wall. And you're like, oh, wow, I know who Primus. So you're like, I can relate to this kid. And another theme of this movie that you'll see in a shitload of the 80s and 90s movies, there's this whole absentee parent thing, because all this shit is going on and we really never see our central character's parents. Oh, did I mention who our central character was? It's none other than Eddie Furlong, star of Terminator 2, Judgment Day. Now, you got James Cameron. James Cameron ain't fucking around. When he makes a movie, you say whatever you want to say about the movie. He gets good performances, especially even out of a child actor. And that is an unenviable task of what Edward Furlong was asked to do in that movie. He's carrying that movie just as much as Arnold. He's carrying it just as much as Linda Hamilton. He's giving a great performance in that movie. And he's annoying in the ways that a kid should be annoying. He's cute. But now, this is like 4, almost 5 years removed from the making of Terminator. And Edward Furlong is like, closing in on 20. And he's kind of starting to look gawky and weird. He's not the cute kid anymore. Now he's a teenager. Even right after Terminator 2, and this is bizarre, he released an album in Japan. And it was a huge hit. Like, it was a big deal. The Japanese loved Edward Furlong. Seriously, go online and find that Edward Furlong album. Oh my God, it is, because he can't sing. And he's like, oh, well, girl, you could have known I'm happy too. You gotta, dude, look up this Eddie Furlong album. It's fucking hot trash, but it sold like 500,000 units in Japan. So they know better than we do, right? That's what I gotta say about the Japanese people. John Flynn, who was directing this movie, he was kind of like a journeyman director, if that makes any sense. He was one of these guys that didn't make this huge cultural impact. He's not like a John Carpenter or a Wes Craven. You see what I'm saying? Like, he's not like a prolific horror director. But he did direct Lock Up with Sylvester Stallone, the prison drama. That was pretty good, to be honest with you. One of his best movies is Rolling Thunder. That's 1977. It's William Devane. It's basically like a Southern Fried Death Wish. Rolling Thunder is a definite recommend. That's a young Tommy Lee Jones in that movie. Did The Outfit. But most what he's known from in the 90s is 1991's Out for Justice with Steven Seagal, who we did a whole big episode on, Sick Plug. Definitely go listen to that episode. Yeah, he's got some stuff in here, but I'm gonna say, like, he did Bestseller, which was another one. That's okay. Bestseller's not bad. Nothing to write home about. But I would say in this guy's filmography, it's Out for Justice, because Out for Justice is a great movie. That was where Steven Seagal gets in bed with the mafia, for better or worse. Probably for his worse. So John Flynn went on record, and the studio was like, listen, we need somebody who kids are going to like and they can relate to. Christian Slater's too old, so we can't plug old Christian Slater into Brain Scan. Luckily, they were able to get Eddie Furlong. And now, kind of word on the street was that Eddie Furlong was difficult to work with. He was partying a lot. He was doing drugs. He was into a lot of extracurricular shenanigans. Flynn was like, all right, whatever. I'm not going to go in with any preconceived notions. I'll put him in the film. We'll make this work. Well, it really didn't work, because the second day on set, Furlong, who was now a 15-year-old kid, he couldn't act. That's what John Flynn said. He calls the second day of production, he calls, TriStar, the people at Sony, and he's like, listen, this Furlong kid, he's a terrible actor. He's really bad. I mean, I don't know what James Cameron got out of this kid, but he's not good. And the studio says, well, he tests really well in the scores. Kids want to see him in a movie, so you're kind of stuck with him. Basically, what ends up happening is on the third day of filming, John Flynn has to go to Eddie Furlong's trailer and slap the shit out of him to get him awake. And this becomes a thing, because what would happen was Furlong would go out all night and he would party, and then he would get back to his trailer, pass out, and just be kind of like, whether it was drugs or drink, he would just be in this coma. So Flynn fucking hated this kid. He hated working with him. The one who plays the detective in this movie is Frank Langella, who obviously is Skeletor from Masters of the Universe. Now, he's been in a lot of great things. He was Dracula in 1979 as John Badham's Dracula, directed Saturday Night Fever. That's a good one. Honestly, Frank Langella as Dracula, total recommend, definite recommend. He's good. He's really good. He brings an intensity to the role that had been unseen, which later would be upstaged by Gary Oldman's performance as Dracula. Who saw that coming? That's a powerful performance right there. But, this is how you get the film financed. You got Edward Furlong, he's a name. You got Frank Langella, he's a name. And that's really how they got the money for this movie. Now, this is the weirdest thing. And I I exhaustively went to figure out what the budget of this movie was. Everywhere I went, nobody could give me a number. Every website I watched, Shout Factory did a special edition Blu-ray of Brain Scan. And I got to tell you, man, there's no information. Like, nobody is willing to pony up exactly what the numbers on this movie were. Because, okay, there's a game in sometimes when you make a movie, and it's like, so you make a cheap movie, right? Terrifier was made for $35,000. So you make the movie, you made it for $35K. Now you show the movie, and people are looking to pick it up, distribute it, and they say, well, how much did you spend on the movie? You say, well, we didn't spend $35,000. We spent $500,000 on this movie because it's a good movie and it doesn't matter how much it costs. But that's usually a time, if you're negotiating, where you inflate the number to some crazy thing. And I don't know, because there are digital effects in this movie. There's obviously prosthetic work. There's nothing in this movie that says to me it was over $3 to $5 million. What could they be paying Furlong? Maybe at that point after Terminator, like, hey, you get $1 million for Furlong, but I don't even think so. I think this is a $500,000 movie for Furlong. Probably $300,000 for Langella as the supporting. It's got less days on set. And you know, let me tell you something. Frank Langella as the detective who's investigating all of these crazy happenings in this town, dude, he's great. Like, he's always good. He brings his A game. What's even crazier is all these murders and things start happening in this town. The craziest part is that there's no other cops. There's no state troopers called in. It's just like everybody in the town is trying to find the murderer. There's kind of like this chaos, this anarchy. It's like we see like in The Simpsons, like in Springfield, when everybody just riots and they're all just looking for this killer. Like, call the cops. Let somebody handle this. The townspeople do not need to find the murderer. And that's the hook with Brain Scan. You get this interactive CD-ROM, the trickster appears, and he says, go murder somebody. And you're like, oh, yeah, this is, you know, it's titillating. What is it like to murder somebody? And to me, there's the first sequence where it's the POV shot of Eddie Furlong going and murdering this man. He cuts this dude's foot off, which is insane. The trickster is guiding him towards it. And I feel like there's a lot of things with the trickster that just aren't explained. It's kind of like is this all a dream? Is this really happening? I will tell you, that first sequence where Eddie Furlong goes and cuts that dude's foot off, it's effective filmmaking. It's scary. At a certain point, you feel like you're watching something forbidden. It's POV, and you're the killer, but it's just a video game, right? And that's really where this works, is like it divides the line. Am I really committing these heinous crimes? Am I killing these people? Or is it just a video game? And by nature, if you have a character called the Trickster, well, you never know. You kind of never know. And that is a little bit of my problem with this movie. It gets a little too carefree with that. Did he really do it? Did he not do it? Was it the Trickster? You know, what's real? And I think ultimately that's kind of what sinks this movie, because what old Uncle Jerry always tells you, you need rules. You need rules to your horror movies. It's very important. They got a little fast and loose, especially with Freddy Krueger. I mean, you get to the third movie, and Wes Craven, who grew up, Wes Craven was going to become a priest. He was going to become a chaplain. He was very much a religious person. But you have this thing, okay, well, he's got to be on consecrated ground, and you got to use holy water. It's the same thing with Dracula. What kills him? Is it a stake through the heart? And then you get into different kinds of vampire movies, and you say, well, silver bullets don't work. Garlic doesn't work. So it's kind of whatever your predetermined rules are. And you look at, this is a great example, is the Lost Boys. The Lost Boys, we establish, what are the rules in this universe? Does this work? Does this not work? And I feel like The Lost Boys fucking nails that. That's like one of the best things I can say about that movie, is like it firmly knows who and what its vampires are, their powers, what they're capable of. They can fly, they can do all kinds of shit. I don't know. I love The Lost Boys. Better movie, kids.
We'll be right back with more of The Offering with Jerry Horror.
Need more for your gore decor? HauntedProps.com has been a leading online Halloween retailer since 2006. And now, the company has opened the first and only year-round Halloween showroom on Long Island. The entire store is decorated and themed with immersive scenes. Yes, the whole thing is set up like a walk-through haunted attraction, and you're literally shopping in a haunted house. They've got gore props, haunted house props, costumes, masks, makeup, and did someone say animatronics? They've got those too. Designed to last and built to scare. Do you need legit-looking props for your film set or photo shoot? HauntedProps.com offers consumer-grade and professional-grade props. They've got something scary for any budget. Here's an idea. You need a location for your event? Haunted Props is a fantastic spot for flea markets, music festivals, carnivals, a haunted house obviously, and any outdoor event you can dream of. Do yourself a favor. Go to the store in Manorville, Long Island, or order off the website, HauntedProps.com, where you can buy what scares you. The term cult film itself refers to the subculture that surrounds underground films and midnight movies. A cafe is usually a small and informal establishment serving various refreshments in an intimate and inviting setting. What do you get when you combine the two? You get the Cult Cafe, located at the Cinema Arts Center in Huntington, New York. Every Saturday night at 10 p.m., Cult Cafe brings you the best in cult film and beloved classics. Curated with care, especially for a devoted fan base of cinephiles. Cult Cafe is where box office bombs are resurrected, and more obscure, transgressive films, shunned by the mainstream, can find a home beautifully projected on a large silver screen. Past movies screened at the Cult Cafe include David Cronenberg's Videodrome, Frank Henenlotter's Basket Case, John Carpenter's The Thing, Sam Raimi's Evil Dead, Victor Bonacor's Thrust, and Richard Kelly's Donnie Darko. Man, the programming there is on point. For tickets and showtimes, head on over to cinemaartscenter.org to find a listing of films, or add Cult Cafe on Facebook to find a series of upcoming events. There really is nothing like seeing an old favorite in a theater full of your fellow movie fans. Hey, maybe I'll even see you there. Cinema will never die at the Cult Cafe. Listeners and fans of The Offering can get their hands on their very own The Offering with Jerry Horror merch, now only at TeePublic. Find your own fresh The Offering with Jerry Horror high-quality merchandise, including t-shirts, hoodies, tank tops, long sleeves, stickers, and mugs. Just like the show, we've got gear that's mostly horror, always genre. The Offering with Jerry Horror TeePublic store has everything you need to represent your favorite podcast. Folks, head on over to teepublic.com right now and pick up your very own Offering tee today. You're listening to The Offering with Jerry Horror. Got a question or story you want to share with me? It might be featured in a future episode. Email me at jerryhorror@gmail.com or hit me up on Twitter at jerryhorror. I'm also on Instagram. You can find me there at Jerry Horror. Rate and review this show on Apple Podcast, and you might find your review in an upcoming episode. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to The Offering. Now back to the show. Okay. I think what happened was, and this is just between you and me, folks. Just you and me here. Come on. We can talk. I think that Sony sunk more money into this movie than they want to admit. And the reason that I think they sunk more money into this film was because they thought in their little brains, just like the people at Universal thought with Shocker and Dr. Giggles, they thought to themselves, we're going to make a ton of money. We're going to clean up. This guy, he's going to be the new Freddy. We're going to make 10 of these movies. We're going to make 10 of them. So they sink more money into the production. And I think that's where we find the discrepancy about the budget to this film. Because, look, I watched all the special features on the Blu-ray. I read on every site. I went to every box office data that I could to try and find some hard numbers. I can tell you what the movie made. I just can't tell you what it cost. And now that we're up to like 60-something episodes, I'm doing the research for these things. I've always found numbers. I got numbers for Xanadu. I got numbers for this, for that. But for whatever reason, I don't know. And I think it was one of these situations. Did they make this movie cheaper than it was? Did they spend more money? And my feeling is that they might have spent more money because there were some reshoots. And they said, well, we've got to get these virtual reality elements into this movie. And if you look at these effects now, you're like, wow, they're pretty crude. And speaking of crude, there's the girl who lives across the street from Eddie Furlong, this girl Jenny, and he has a crush on her, and he films her. I don't know, but like, dude, I get it. I've been a kid. I used to, you look out your window, you want to see the girl across the way changing or whatever. But he's literally filming this girl. The way they use this actress in the film, it's very sleazy the way they film her. They've got her in a negligee by the end of the movie. And, you can tell she's underage, and it just, something about it feels really sleazy. I don't know. It's just kind of gross. Hey, did I mention Steve Johnson, one of my favorite effects artists? He was married to Linnea Quigley. He's great. Steve Johnson is an absolute master. He did Species. You gotta love Species. Everybody loves Species. Come on. Natasha Henstridge, half naked in that movie. Woo! Oh my God. I had an awakening. I mean, come on. You know him from Howling 6: The Freaks. It's another, I like Howling 6. He also, he did Howling 4, the original Nightmare. That's pretty terrible. More importantly, Nightmare on Elm Street 4, The Dream Master. Sick plug, previous episode when Freddy Krueger ruled the world. Predator. Oh my God, he did Predator. This guy, man, he got around, huh? Well, Steve Johnson's an absolute master. And don't forget that Steve Johnson was the daddy of Slimer, who, if you remember, well, you might not know this, but Slimer was based on John Belushi. That's who he was supposed to be, the Spud. And that's, I guess that's what he's most famous for, right? Is the Slimer thing? Steve Johnson, daddy of Slimer. Maybe they call him Daddy Slimer. You think Linnea Quigley called him Daddy Slimer? He's like, Daddy Slimer, get away from me. So, and this is my problem. We just talked about this with Rick Baker. Steve Johnson does all of these fucking incredible effects, and some of them, and this is really cool, if you buy the Blu-ray, you can see that Johnson shot a lot of this stuff, the scenes, with VHS cameras, and you can see the VHS footage of the effects, and there is some really nasty, gnarly monsters and gags that he put together, and man, the stuff was fantastic. They cut it out of the movie. You paid this guy. This is the guy. It's Daddy Slimer. You paid him all this money, and you cut his effects out of the movie, just like they did with Rick Baker on The Wolfman and Cursed. It's crazy. I don't know. It is what it is. Again, definitely buy the Blu-ray. There's a lot of great stuff. There's a lot of behind-the-scenes featurettes. Definitely worth your time. Now, it's a rad movie, and it's 1994. So, I mean, you can't have a rad movie without a rad soundtrack, right? You got kind of a hodgepodge of bands on this because it was kind of like, the Seattle sound had moved in. So you've got hard rock, you've got grunge, you've got heavy metal. We've got Alcohol Funny Car. I'm not familiar with their music. We have Mudhoney. You know Mudhoney. White Zombie, Old, Dandelion, Primus, Tad, Pitch Shifter, and Butthole Surfers. It also has the main title theme from George S. Clinton. Not who you think it is. It is not the singer of Parliament Funkadelic. This is the guy who does score work. Most famously, he did the score for 1995's Mortal Kombat, which would happen a year later. This has a pretty good soundtrack. I'll be honest with you. I went back and I listened to it. It's very of its era. It's very like, this is an alternative soundtrack. These are alternative bands, and this is, to the best of our knowledge, what we're doing. It's a 1994 soundtrack, and it's like, if you grew up in this time period, you remember these bands. You remember Primus. You remember Butthole Surfers. Butthole Surfers were great. They had some really great tunes. Ultimately, the crux of this movie, like what becomes the problem, not just Eddie Furlong's bad behavior, but the studio sees the dailies and they say to themselves, we need more Trickster in this movie. Guys, I mean, I don't want to, so they had to do reshoots. You knew reshoots were coming for Brain Scan. And we go back, we're like, oh my God, we need to get more of this character. It's like the whole thing with The Simpsons and Itchy and Scratchy and Poochie, where it's like, oh, like we need to get more Poochie into this show because it's the company, it's the studio forcing the character. So Flynn was like, I don't know how much more Trickster I can fit in this movie. And they're like, you can fit as much as we fucking tell you. And we'll, that's what happens. It's unfortunate. People think that they're going to have total control And it is like generally the absolute opposite. And the higher you go up the food chain, there's all these nightmarish stories that are coming out now about making movies for Marvel, where they had like 2 other crews shooting different stuff. And I've heard reports, and again, it's too soon into this whole timeline, we'll probably get them in 10 or 20 years, where they were making the Marvels, and Kevin Feige had like 2 other units that were just shooting another movie. And then Ava DuVernay, she directed Candyman. She got the movie back and she saw the movie. She was like, this isn't the movie I shot. What is this? And that's what happens. That's unfortunately what happens. Producer Pete and I were talking about it before. The Faustian bargain you make with the studio. You signed off. They're in control. That little film you wanted to make, that little indie darling romantic comedy, nope, guess what? It's an action movie. And now it's got Michael Biehn. You lose control of your baby. Andrew Kevin Walker, who wrote this, he lost control of it. This was about a VHS. There was no trickster, but the studio saw dollar signs. And, he's okay. Like I said, he doesn't do much. Freddy kind of has this operating level where he's torturing you and he's tormenting you. The trickster is just kind of like this guy in the video game. And he's like, see what you did? He's like, well, what did I do? Well, I can't really explain it because I'm the trickster. Woohoo! I don't know. It doesn't work for me. Even at the end of this movie, we kind of see that Edward Furlong, he's at the principal's office, and there's this real hard-ass principal. Because in the 90s, you had to have the hard-ass principal. It's like, you're gonna get suspended. We're going to throw you out of school. That kind of guy. He's like, so... you like horror movies? He's like, oh yeah, I got this game. I think you're really gonna like it. So he gives him the game. That's obviously with Trickster. And then the Trickster appears at the end of the movie, and he's right behind the principal, and he's like, giving like Edward Furlong the thumbs up. He's like, oh, it's kind of like the whole thing based on The Ring. Like he's passing the curse of this video game. And obviously the video game is called Brain Scan. That's what we're doing here. So if you were wondering what the title of the video game in the movie is, it's Brain Scan. And that's my problem with the whole film. I don't know if he committed any of these crimes. I'm not quite sure at the end of the day. And I think that's the problem. But it's a fun ride. It's a goofy, fun time. It's not a definite recommend. But if you grew up in the 90s, it's a recommend. This film was released April 22nd, 1994. We don't know what the budget was because whatever. It made $4.5 million, which is not a lot. You think about what they had to spend. Because Sony got behind this movie. We got a soundtrack. We're trying to have this new horror icon. Like they got behind it. Like there were posters. They marketed this movie. It wasn't like an anonymous movie that came out. With that being said, the adjusted inflation would be $10.2 million, just to give you an idea of 2024 money. And it didn't really catch on. There is no trickster. What is the legacy of this movie? Well, there's no action figures. I think, Fright Rags did a t-shirt. They did a Trickster t-shirt, which I thought was cool. But it's a niche thing. It's like you either know about it and you grew up with it or you don't. But you know what? Here's the deal. If you're one of our younger listeners, watch Brain Scan because you're going to be transported into a portal that is specifically 1994 and it will take you to that time and location. Obviously, the critical reception for this film was mostly negative. Rotten Tomatoes gave the film a rotten rating of 13% based on 16 reviews. Entertainment Weekly gave it a D. Despite its lurid premise, Brain Scan offers 0 in the way of sick thrills. Whoa. Variety also gave it a negative review, saying it's a rare teen horror pick that can be faulted for excessive restraint, but Brain Scan may be too tame for the creature feature fans and slasher devotees who will be drawn in by its ad campaign. And that's kind of the truth, because this movie is squarely marketed at teenagers. I could relate to it. I would buy stuff out of the back of those horror rags like Fangora and stuff. You that's what you did. You were into this, man. You were living the horror lifestyle. You would try to get your hands on anything. Video games, collectibles. Now you get whatever you want. Now you want toys, you want this, you want a video game. I just got a RoboCop game that was fantastic. We're getting a Starship Troopers game that looks great. We're getting a Killer Clowns. Well, they're adding the DLC because there ain't much to do with that game. But still, did I think as a 45-year-old man I would have a Killer Clowns game? No, I didn't. But we did an episode on Killer Clowns. Sick plug. Definitely go back and listen to that episode. We didn't really get anything for Brain Scan. It hasn't had an enduring legacy like some of these other films. And there's kind of a reason why. There's not a lot out there. If you want to try to get stuff, the special edition Blu-ray is probably your best bet. All right, kids. Are you ready? It's time for my favorite part of the show, Unhinged Reviews. Now, this person doesn't have a name. They are just Amazon customer. I guess they did this anonymously. 1 star out of 5. Headline, garbage. Please, for me, do not watch this film. I just wasted an hour and a half of my life that could have been spent cleaning my navel. Dude, what's in your navel that you're cleaning that shit for? You should definitely hit up a doctor. But okay, let me continue. Maybe if you were under the age of 14, you might enjoy the triteness of this waste of celluloid. He thinks he's all smart by using celluloid. Go fuck yourself. You think you're above this. I am definitely dumber now after watching this. No, you were pretty dumb to begin with, because most people who say that stole that from somewhere else. I'm dumber for watching this. No, dude, you haven't. Let me tell you something. You go live your life. Life is going to throw you a lot of fucking hot shovels of shit, and you're going to see. You're going to see, pal. You watch Brain Scan in a couple of years after you get beaten down by the man. You might like Brain Scan. Whatever. That guy left a bad taste in my mouth. This was written by S. Savov. 2 out of 5 stars. Headline, disappointed. I am really disappointed with this movie. I mean, I thought the idea is cool, but it just didn't play up to my expectations. Mostly because Trickster was not scary, all caps, not scary. I thought he would be scary and demented and forceful. Ooh, forceful, huh? Instead, he breaks his fingers and sticks his fingers in his eyes. Crap like that. That isn't scary, but rather funny and gross. You know when the audience goes, ew, it's stupid. The background music was the worst part. It's more like a low-budget Friday the 13th. Although I love Friday the 13th, Jason rocks. But let's face it, the music was a little bit annoying. Okay, look, I kind of like the atmosphere it created. The lonely boy in his room, his high-tech stuff, but at the end of the day, it's not a horror movie. This is a science fiction movie. Remember in the beginning of the episode, I talked about Virtuosity, The Matrix, Total Recall. Brain Scan is very much a science fiction movie. And I think the different original script that was written for this with the VHS tapes, I think that was a horror movie. And then because of too many cooks in the kitchen, because of them shoving the Trickster into the movie, I think it does become more of a science fiction movie. So as much as I can vehemently disagree or agree, you're right. You're not wrong. It is a different breed. It's not really... This is not a pure horror movie. There are horrific aspects to it. And that's the other thing, too. There's some gruesome stuff in this movie, but they made a big deal about the R rating, and I just don't see it. I think this movie could have been more violent, more bloody. This review comes from Mrs. D. Moncrief. Wow. 2 out of 5 stars. This is a verified purchase on Amazon. This is someone who bought the special edition Blu-ray. Quite dull and Furlong is awful. That's the headline. Oof, we're off to a bad start. And he is terrible in this movie. He is. He's just so fucking annoying because he's not a cute kid anymore. This is him. Like, he's gone through puberty. He's kind of like, I'm Edward Furlong. And he just kind of sucks. He does. Brain Scan is a very dated sci-fi horror film. You get the impression that the producers hoped might become a franchise. That's exactly... Brain Scan is a franchise non-starter. I mean, there's no other way to say it. The whole thing is spoiled by Edward Furlong. It's so true. It really is. I don't know. Maybe if you put another kid in this movie... But that's the thing. Could you get it financed without, like, the star of Terminator 2, Edward Furlong? Because whenever you have a big hit like that, that's how they're going to market it. They're going to say, the star of Terminator 2 returns. I don't know. It is what it is. Spoiled by Furlong, who simply cannot act, and the story begins to drag. I never made it to the end. Can you imagine spending $20-something on a Blu-ray? I'm making it to the end. I'm getting right to I want to see who fucking did the catering just because I'm getting my money's worth. Well, here's the conclusion, folks. Real simple, real easy. Let's not get crazy with this. It is a cultural artifact. If you wanted to venture back to the mid, yeah, 94. It's kind of the mid. 95 would be mid. The movie's mid, you know? It's not a very good movie, but I enjoy it because it's innocuous. It's this studio desperately trying to get another horror villain cooking, and it doesn't work. And the reason it doesn't work is because it's forced. When you have a horror villain, there has to be a sense of organic beginnings. Ghostface, there's an organic nature to it. Jason, there's just something where the audience connects with it, and then we go off the rails in the sequels. Initially, Freddy Krueger is really fucking scary. You barely see him. By the time we get to that third or fourth movie, he's like, we'll see, bitch. He's just fucking quipping. He's doing his Henny Youngman. He's killing Dick Cavett and Zsa Zsa Gabor. But that's Freddy, and Freddy is one of a kind. If anything, what we've learned this season, especially with Shocker, especially with Dr. Giggles, and especially with Brain Scan, is that it's lightning in a bottle. Stop trying to make Freddy Krueger. Freddy is what he is because Wes Craven was a fucking genius, and he took something out of his own nightmares and brought it onto the silver screen. And let me tell you, I recently rewatched that 1984. They put out that new 4K of Nightmare on Elm Street. Oh my God, it's a great movie. But it works. But the reason that it works is because we haven't expanded. And remember, those sequels aren't made. The third one's written by Wes Craven. But the stuff that expands the Freddy into what he became as a cultural icon is not there. He's a scary child murderer. He lives in a boiler room. He may or may not have molested and murdered a bunch of kids. He was wrongfully or rightfully accused and burned alive by the townspeople. That's a starting point. That's all in the first movie. The groundwork is laid. Who's the trickster? Where did he come from? What's his story? I don't know, but we are just fucking around for a good 90 minutes trying to figure that out. And I think what would have been cool if you wanted to make this movie work, you needed to keep the trickster grounded. And the way that I would have done this, because we're doing all the computer sci-fi bullshit anyway, you have a guy who creates, because it's supposed to be, Brain Scan is made by a company. It says the address goes back to Texas. You have a guy who's making this game, and he's a wacko. He's a fucking devil worshiper. He fucking eats children. And nobody knows this, but he's making the game, and then he gets sucked into the game, kind of like Tron. And now he's haunting these discs. Like once you put the disc in, he's like, he can interact with you. That's more of a starting point, but we're not given anything like that. We're just given, oh, it's the trickster and he's the new Freddy. I digress. I'm sorry. If you watch the original marketing for this movie, it was very much like, no, we don't have a sci-fi. We've got the fucking trickster, and he is going to be your new buddy. You're going to have posters of him on your wall, and it's going to be amazing. Just like you have your Dr. Giggles poster and your Shocker poster, which I have to say, yeah, Universal Studios, god damn, Shocker's a great poster. Dr. Giggles is a great poster. You know who did some great artwork? David Graham. David Graham, thank you so much. He always comes up with fantastic artwork. He put me in the Shocker poster. He puts me in all these things. And thank you. You know, you can buy those. Did I tell you? Producer Pete, if I told you, you could go to TeePublic right now. Get yourself some sick-ass Offering merchandise. Have you ever wanted to see me as Linda Blair in The Exorcist 2? Yes, you have. Yes, you have. It's indelible. My face on hers, it will haunt your dreams for years to come. Don't forget, folks, I hope that you're having the most wonderful Halloween season of your life. I hope you had tons of pumpkin lattes. I hope you went to all the haunted houses. You got all spooky. You decorated your house. You spent the money you were supposed to spend on your bills to buy a Art the Clown animatronic at Spirit. It's fine. Your kids don't need to go to college. You know what they need? They need Pennywise animatronics in front of your house, because that's what makes Halloween. No, what makes Halloween special is when you create things on your own and you do the best you can. Just like these movies. Sometimes you don't need $1 million. All you need is a bunch of fucking crazy dudes in a basement figuring the fuck out how they're going to make something for nothing. And that is when the magic happens. Not when a studio mandates it. Not when a studio tries to shove it down your throat. So what I say to all of you, keep having your dreams. Maybe they'll turn into nightmares. And by nightmares, I mean pools full of money like Scrooge McDuck. You could. Listen, somebody listening to this show right now, I might not be the next Wes Craven, but maybe you can be. And you can go out and you can make a movie and it'll fucking change the world. And it'll be like the best shit we've ever done. And then I can take all the credit for it. And I can be like, oh man, you know, like I birthed the next Jordan Peele. He would listen to The Offering and I didn't think I could do it. But then Jerry said I could do it. And he became like my Mickey. And I felt like Rocky. And I took on the world. And I made this great movie. And now Jerry is he's sleeping on my couch. He's eating shit out of my refrigerator and taking credit for my amazing vision. And that's pretty much what will happen. So, I'm a little bit of a fortune teller, and that is what's in your spooky future. Folks, I hope you've had a good time with us. This is the penultimate episode of The Offering. We're getting down to the nitty-gritty. Almost time for the explosive finale that will blow your mind. But until then, make sure you're just a decent human being. You know, get out there, give the kids some candy. Don't be a Scrooge on Halloween. Is that a thing? That's not a thing. But you get what I'm saying. Embrace the holiday. Have fun with it. You don't have to have the $1,500 animatronic. Maybe you and your friends just throw some sheets on your head and burn a cross on somebody's lawn. Wait, no, that is not the message I wanted to send out this Halloween. Well, regardless, you know what I meant, and I meant something good. Folks, this has been The Offering with me, your host, Jerry Horror. Don't forget, like, subscribe, 5 stars. You know, I'll read the review. Jesus Christ. Stop. I read Jen Feldman's, read this other guy's. I'll read all kinds of reviews. I don't care. I'm a slut like that. You should know that because you love this show. Let me do it again. This has been The Offering with me, your host, Jerry Horror. Always horror, mostly genre. Did I fuck it up again? Mostly, oh, that's what it is. This has been The Offering with me, your host, Jerry Horror. Mostly... This has been The Offering with me, your host, Jerry Horror. Can we just leave this in? Just leave it all in. They need to know what a fuck up I am. They need to know. This has been The Offering with me, your host, Jerry Horror. Mostly horror, always genre. You've been listening to The Offering with Jerry Horror, produced by Pete Bune. If you have a question or story you want to share with me, we'd love to hear from you. You can email me at theofferingwithjerryhorror@gmail.com or hit us up on Twitter at theofferingwjh or hit me up on the Instagram at Jerry Horror. You get the picture? Subscribe to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you find your favorite podcast. Join us next time for another Offering.
Chasing worries like Maya, genre twists that shake your core. Every episode, we craving more. Mostly horror, always genre.
This has been a Sick Boy Wolfgang production. Thank you for listening.